Today's guest is Johann Kerbrat, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Robinhood Crypto. Since joining the company in 2021, he's led Robinhood's crypto push through one of the industry's most transformative periods, taking the company from a crypto trading app into one building tokenized assets, stablecoins, and its own blockchain. Johann, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you again. How are you all?
Great. Good. Thanks for coming on.
Big month for you guys, I would say. But before we get into everything that Robinhood is doing, let's bring it back to our signature question, which is, what does crypto in America mean to you, Johann?
Well, for us, it's been really a long time coming, where initially America was at the forefront of crypto. And then for a few years, people were kind of avoiding America to build on crypto. And I think now it's back to normal, and it's one of the most liquid country about crypto and one of the most enthusiastic. So really excited to still be here and build with the company. We have 27 million funded accounts. And, if we can bring all of these people on chain, I think it will change the way that we're looking at crypto and blockchain in general.
Yeah, we talked to your CEO, Vlad, about kind of the early Robinhood craze, the crypto times when, it's the height of the meme coin craze and everything going on there, when the company was also under a bit of scrutiny too, when it pulled the crypto assets, more or less. What was it kind of like walking into Robinhood at that moment? Because I know you joined Robinhood Crypto in 2021, right? So it must have been a very different environment than where you are today.
Yeah, when I joined, we were still a small team, but there was all the craziness around crypto again. Like, there was a wave of 2017, then it died down, and then it came back end of 2020, beginning of 2021. And so we had a lot of things to build. We didn't have transfers, for example, at that time. We couldn't, send to your own wallet using Robinhood. So we had to build a lot of things from scratch, which was really exciting as an engineer, but also a little scary to do that at the same time as everything going on in the market. But, since then, when I joined, the idea was really like, we had 20 million customers at the time. And we were thinking, like, what if we can bring them on chain and actually really get them to utilize crypto without having all the barrier to entry that you have usually when you use like a wallet. And I think that's what Robinhood was really good at, is to remove all these like friction points to get into investing and get into your finance management. So I was really excited to join Robinhood to do that for crypto and for blockchain. It took some time, but I think we are slowly getting there. And with some of the announcements we've done last week, you can see really the enthusiasm from our customer to get into that space.
Yeah. So Johann, I know we're going to talk a lot about what you guys are doing now, but just going back to that time, that's around when I myself was getting into crypto full time and actually moving to DC. And I remember kind of like the come in and register days, and there was the sort of meme coin trade. Mm-hmm. There was, a lot of different sort of speculation. There also weren't a lot of people coming to DC. Robinhood was one of them, coming in and testifying. But we've seen the regulatory environment change enormously since then. Like, what has been some of the biggest changes that you've seen just in how you approach building products and interacting with regulators, and what you guys are able to do in the crypto space?
Yeah, I mean, we've spent a lot of time trying to work with regulators and regulation in general. And if you think about it, I think we've done very well as a company. We have multiple licenses on the brokerage side. On the crypto side, we are licensed by the New York DFS. We have many money transmitting licenses across the US. We also got the MiCA license in Europe. So, it really shows that Robinhood knows how to work with a regulator. There was a period of time where, in the US, we were trying to do more and we couldn't. And we were kind of blocked by this like uncertainty and lack of clarity around crypto regulation. And I think that's really what slowed us down in a lot of ways, where we wanted to do what our customers were asking for, but we were not necessarily able to. And I think what changed recently is just now we can actually meet with the regulator. We can talk to the crypto task force at the SEC. We've been able to discuss about all the different issues that we have on the platform and what we think needs to change or needs to be improved for the end customer. And I think there's still a lot to do, right? The Clarity Act is still not there. There is still a lot of fragmentation in the market in the US. We have features like staking, for example, that are available for 46 states, but we still have 4 states that we do not offer the product in. And I think it's frustrating for the customer at the end of the day. Like, you know, they want to be able to access these products. They want to be able to clearly use the technology. It's been more than 10 years that people are saying that this was just a trend and this will die down, and it's not dying down, right? So we need to have clear regulation around it, and we need to make sure that all our customer can actually utilize blockchain and crypto the way that they want to.
Yeah. We've had some eternal optimists and then some realists on the show around clarity. I'd love to get your take, Johann, maybe on the side of, you know, if things don't turn positive on the clarity front, what does that really mean for Robinhood and the business and moving forward with all these different initiatives? Do you still feel confident that everything will be fine stateside, or is it kind of like, okay, now Robinhood's looking to maybe more of a global market where there are more favorable terms for the crypto industry?
Well, I think, you know, for us, it's important to say that crypto is a global play. We actually launch in the EU, our platform really based on blockchain and crypto technology, because we think that this will allow us to expand faster, but also bring better tools and better features to customer over there. So we are not looking at crypto just for the US, but I think what I was saying just before, it's going to be more of this like frustration that we're getting from customer who want to utilize crypto, but they can't because they are in one of the states that are more against crypto than the other. And because crypto is mostly of a global feature, global technology, it's kind of going against this idea that it's limited to one state. But I think for us, you know, we will adapt no matter what happens with the regulation. I also think that, you know, with everything that happened in the past couple of years, administration and hopefully future administration understood that this is an important topic for more than just a few engineer or geek in their garage, and it's something that actually the population care about. So hopefully, no matter what happened on the administration side, we will see that, you know, there will be clear regulation on crypto side, the same way that we've seen that in Europe and in other places. I think that's really where I want us to make sure that we don't fall behind, is that when you see that in the US we're still kind of debating on the Clarity Act, and you see the EU with the MiCA framework, you see that in other places like in Singapore and other places in the world. I really want to make sure that we don't fall behind. And again, we see this exodus of company and startup building in other places and in the US. And that means that, you know, our customers are not the first one to be able to access this product. It also means that we're losing jobs and losing wealth creation. So that's a part of thing that I really think as an American company, we want to push for.
Yeah, Johann, I think with clarity, as we come up to, you know, the final month that the bill can be put on the Senate floor, realistically, to really push this legislation through by the end of this Congress. Anyway, a lot of crypto companies here in the US will be looking towards the regulators for that stopgap, as it were, you know, the SEC and the CFTC. You mentioned earlier there was some, you know, Robinhood got a Wells notice, I believe, from the SEC back during the Gary Gensler days. And how have those discussions evolved with, you know, you guys recently? I mean, a big push into tokenization, right? That's front and forefront of the SEC's mind. I'm sure we'll talk a lot more about tokenization with you in this episode, but just from a, you know, chatting with the regulator standpoint, are you confident that, you know, Robinhood's business from that side of things anyway will be, you know, pretty good to go in the US under, you know, the current SEC and those discussions you've been having there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's such a different situation as before. Like I said, and I think you had Dan on the show, and I'm sure he explained more in details some of what happened. But, you know, in the past, we couldn't even meet with the SEC to really discuss some of the crypto regulation and crypto problems that we were facing. And now it's a very different situation where we're able to meet with the task force. We're able to meet with the SEC when there's a topic. I've been invited to talk to at the SEC roundtable around tokenization, for example. That didn't happen before. So it's definitely a different environment. And I think for us, what's interesting is that if you really want to regulate such a complicated industry, you can't just do it sitting far away from it in a desk in DC. You have to talk to the industry. You have to talk to the participants that have been building for 10 years plus to really understand what are the complexity. It's a very complex problem where you have all the things that they are trying to regulate with clarity, and you also have all the DeFi aspect that is still not really touched if you think about it with the Clarity Act. So I really think having this open dialogue has been very helpful, and hopefully we'll see more and more of that to help shape the future of crypto in general. But to answer your question on tokenization, the chairman of the SEC, Paul Askins, multiple times said that this was one of the priority for them. So I think that is something that makes me believe that we'll see some changes there. And really think that it's going to benefit the customer. At the end of the day, the value of tokenization is not just the idea of like putting stock on chain, but it's also about getting a 24/7 trading system where, during weekends or when there are news, the stock market is maybe paused, but the actual worlds keep turning. And so I think it's really important for us to have a 24/7 system that allows you to hedge your position, to trade what's happening in the market. Instant settlement is also something that is really different. You mentioned the GME situation with Robinhood back in 21. In a world where everything is tokenized with instant settlement, the situation with GME would have been very different. And so I think that type of opportunities that tokenization bring to customers is something that we need to be at the forefront. And I think the US will catch up and lead the way there. We launched our stock tokens in the EU first because there was this framework that allowed us to do it. But, the tokenization engine that we build that supports this idea of taking stocks and putting them on chain and managing corporate action, managing dividends and all this stuff can work no matter the jurisdiction. So the day that we have clear rule in the US, we'll be able to adapt to it.
Yeah, Johann, I'm glad you brought that up in terms of launching like the tokenized stocks in the EU first. I know there's a lot of demand for US equity markets like outside the US, and tokenization is a big part of that. You mentioned all these jurisdictions that you guys have to work with, but I'm curious about the customers that you see and the products they want built in like all these other markets you guys are in. I know we're going to talk a lot about what's going on in the US, but how do you approach these different customer bases, and what do you see from them sort of around the world about, what they actually want to trade and want to do?
Yeah, so for a lot of our customers, they don't have access to something like Robinhood. So they don't have access to the commission-free trading 24/5. We're open 24/5 on Robinhood. And so a lot of the sentiment that we got when we were discussing to our customer was they want to access the US market, but it's not open when they are actually, awake because of the time zone difference, or they still have to pay commission. A lot of places in Europe don't allow payment for order flow. I mean, actually, it's just not allowed by regulation, and so you don't have that, and so you still have a lot of competitor of Robinhood that are charging a commission. Some are fixed, it's like €1, but some are still variable. And so for a lot of these customers, it's not the best place to invest, and they prefer to invest into European market or other markets. The other thing that we saw is that a lot of them are asking for a lot of options. Like they want multiple ETFs, they want multiple stocks. And so some of the offering that are limited to 50 or 70 assets are not really responding to their demand. But Robinhood actually did a commission where it was basically a survey to a lot of customers. And we were pretty interested to see that more than 50% of customers knows about the stock token product, and they are excited by it because of the 24/5 aspect, because of the low fee situation. So I think we are just at this, kind of change of era where people are still using a lot of their traditional system. You sometimes have tax advantages if you use a specific account and you trade through that account. But slowly they are seeing the advantages of tokenization. And so it's a question of how are we going to combine the two worlds, the traditional finance world and the new world. But I think, in the next year or two, we will start seeing some of that converging, and that's when you will really see the adoption increasing more and more into this real world asset being tokenized.
Yeah, on the note of kind of those traditional and crypto worlds changing or combining, one of the biggest sort of topics lately, I guess, in the States is perps. And I know there's, perps have been outside of the States for a while. It's been a pretty big, very highly liquid space. How are you guys looking at like that market and demand for products like that?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting with perps is that it's a primitive that was really invented by the crypto world, and slowly it's going to take over the traditional finance worlds, which, as a geek in crypto, I think is very interesting. But so for us, we saw it as a product that has a lot of demand. So we launched it in the EU as well, first last year, because again, like we had the right regulatory framework to launch it. We launched about 12, 13 different crypto contracts that allows you to get leverage up to 10x. And what we saw from people is that they love the product. They love being able to go short. They love being able to go long, cross margin, all these kind of things. And leverage was actually not necessarily the top request by our customers. Like we see a ton of customers actually using 1x, on the short side, for example. They just want to hedge a position, or they just want to hedge, news or thing like that. So I think, we are far from the stories where we hear on DeFi where you have like 50, 100x and people only want to use that. We see a lot of our customers actually wanting to use a more safe and regulated platform to handle their perpetuals. 2 weeks ago, we also launched commodities on perps, so you can have perps for gold, silver, also some ETFs. So we are trying to expand more and more our perpetual product, and we think, we are going to see traction. And on the DeFi side, we also partnered with Lighter, who is kind of offering the perps product on a Robinhood wallet. And we have a pretty unique partnership with them that will allow us to continue to offer more and more perpetual contracts. And, right now that's where we are. Obviously, the US is a big market. We want to work on that. And there's still some discussion happening at the CFTC level on what we can do or what we cannot do. But I really think perps is a great product. Some people compare it to CFDs. I think it's pretty different. You have a clean order book where you have bid and ask on the book. You don't necessarily have spread that are inflated or anything like that. So I think it's something that we'll see more and more development in the industry.
What do you think it'll take to kind of get the everyday trader on Robinhood to be interested and then also trading perps? Because right now it feels like a very crypto native product, maybe more risk on, but is there a near-term future where that narrative maybe changes?
Yeah, well, I think for us, we consider it as an advanced product. So I still think that we don't want all the retail participants to get on it if they don't understand it. So if you want to participate on Robinhood, you have to actually pass an assessment that will ask you a bunch of questions to make sure that you actually understand it. But I think it's all about education. The idea of perps allowing you to hedge your portfolio is a great way, for example, to do it, but you have to understand how to do it. You have to understand the opportunities around it. There is different tax treatment if you use perps versus stocks, for example. So that's where we want to spend more time on, making sure that customers understand exactly how the product works and also what does it allow them to do. But if you think about, the way that you can use margin more in a more optimized way, the way you can use your capital basically in a more optimal way, I think a lot of customers are actually excited by it, but they do need to learn about it first.
How about Robinhood Chain, Johann? So your, hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of customers on Robinhood will now have the chance to go on chain if they like through Robinhood's own bespoke blockchain. That's something you guys announced a couple weeks back. How has the response been? I hear it's been quote unquote ripping, but maybe you can speak to some of the data points around that since launch.
Yeah, it's been a great launch, to be honest. We've seen a lot of traction. Already 3 billion traded on DEXs on the chain. We saw 45 million plus transaction. it really shows that people were excited by it. I think the main reason we're seeing this is this idea that we are converging the two worlds together, not just crypto, but not just TradFi, and we're trying to bridge the gap between the two. This time that we spent reducing the friction, for example, bridging is pretty easy if you use our wallet or if you use some of our apps. So I think we're really excited by the way that the launch has been going, and I think it's just the beginning. We still have a lot of partners that are reaching out that want to understand how to build on the chain. And obviously we were kind of in a stealth mode until earlier this year when we launched the testnet. And so a lot of people were kind of waiting and see before engaging with us. So it's been exciting to see that. But, overall, I think where I'm the most excited about is all the tools that we are going to be able to build through that chain. One of the first products that we launched is called Robinhood Earn, where we are basically allowing people using the main Robinhood app, so not a crypto-specific app or anything like that, the main Robinhood that we have tens of millions of users on, to lend their money through a stablecoin and get 7% approximately back in yield. And so that is really like kind of the convergence between the people that are used to traditional finance and being able to be introduced into a more DeFi world without having to understand private keys, bridging, and all these kind of things. So we're hoping that we can build more and more of these features. We talked about tokenization. That will also happen through our chain, and really bring masses into the crypto world.
Johann, I have to ask about like the sort of partnerships and integration side of the product. Like obviously everybody in crypto wants to come work with Robinhood. You guys are buttoned up. Like enormous user base, right? Like tons of traction, very probably crypto savvy or at least crypto adjacent consumer base, even back in the like meme stock days. Mm-hmm. What do you guys, you mentioned the lighter partnership. What do you guys look for when you're approached by say like a DeFi project or like somebody who wants to integrate with you guys? Like what are some of the criteria that you look for in deciding like what's next? Because obviously like you can't just integrate with everybody all at once. How do you think through that?
Yeah, so that was one of the big reasons we wanted the chain to be permissionless. We really wanted to allow everyone to build on it and not necessarily have to be linked to Robinhood or partners with Robinhood. And so that's what, we've been really focusing on. And we've done only a few of these like partnership, like you mentioned, with Lighter or Morpho for the Earn product, because we want to really spend time into kind of improving the UX and UI for any of the product that we launch. So if you look at the Earn product, it really takes you a few taps to be able to land your USDG on the chain, and that feature really took like almost more than a year to build. We looked at different partners. We spent a lot of time, discussing with different ones to make sure that we were optimizing for the right thing. And once we were able to select one partner, that's when, we did the contracts and everything like that. But, we are usually the one reaching out to the partners when we want to build something specific. And same thing with Perps. We wanted to create this very unique experience, very simple to use, not one where you have to enter like 20 numbers on your phone, like some other apps. And so we want to have this like deep connection with the partner so that we can really ask them to improve their product or to build the API a certain way so that we can use it, like these kind of things. And then on the chain, our goal is really to have everyone to build on it. And, if there are ways where we think that we can make our customer benefit from what is being built, we will definitely try to integrate that. But overall, like we want to make sure that everyone can build without necessarily having Robinhood to be involved in every single thing.
Yeah. I want to talk to you a little bit more about the strategy on the front of Robinhood Chain, because we've seen some conversations around maybe corpo chains or corporate chains or the generalist chains, and the thesis for that latter one being dead, right? Maybe not right, but that's what we've had some people say. And so I'm curious from your perspective, you talked about the permissionless nature, the strategy, the partnerships, et cetera. Where do you ultimately want Robinhood Chain to sit within the conversation? And do you want it to be a DeFi chain, a trading chain, something specific, or you believe in the general thesis and see opportunity there?
Yeah, I think it's a combination, so it might not be the best answer, but we do want the chain to be able to support anything that people are interested in. So, if it's about trading assets that are created or meme coins or anything like that, we want the chain to be able to support that. I think it will be very anti-blockchain, anti-crypto to be like, this type of activity cannot happen on the Robinhood chain. And that's definitely not what we want to do. Like, we want to support creators and people that are innovating in the space, and we want to make sure that the chain works. But I think where we spend more of our time on as a company and with my product team and engineering team is to really build a feature that we think will be integrated within Robinhood and be benefiting all customers. And so that's where we're spending more time on earns, on real world assets with tokenized assets. AI also, we wanted to make sure that the chain from the get-go will work well with AI. So that's why we had some partners like Privy, for example, deploying their skills on the chain from day one so that you can really create your agents and interact with the chain in an easy way without having to struggle or create alternative MCPs or things like that. So for us, that's really like this kind of 3-4 areas that we're really focusing on. We also announced this partnership with Lighter and also with Arcus, where it's more about DEX trading, perps, and spot on DEXs. But overall, we do want the chain to support any desire from our customers. So we will keep watching the metrics and the analytics dashboards to make sure that if we see a problem or if we see something that is not the most optimal, we will be able to change. But right now, we've been happy with the metrics in other ways, like the speed of transaction, the amount of latency that we have that is better than a lot of our competitors. Like, all these kind of things make us feel pretty happy about the technical show that we've made so far.
Yeah, Johann, you mentioned the meme coin.
Hey, Crypto in America listeners. The crypto companies leading this industry aren't waiting for regulation to catch up. They're building on infrastructure that's already there. SumSub is the verification platform powering 8 of the world's 10 biggest crypto exchanges. Global coverage, 1,400 plus supported documents, full travel rule compliance across 2,100 VASPs, and AI-powered fraud detection that acts before threats hit the blockchain. But it doesn't just keep you compliant, it helps you convert. With a seamless UX, reusable KYC, and tools like SumSub ID, you onboard more users faster and keep them moving. And with a no-code platform, you stay compliant from day one, no matter how regulations change. Download SumSub's State of Crypto 2026 report in the description below to get a clear read on today's crypto landscape and the practical moves teams are using to stay ahead.
And I think that is what Robinhood is seeing the most from its Robinhood chain at the moment. I was told that this is kind of a common thing and that Base actually went through the same kind of thing in its early days before it started to attract other, financial products. But, was this something that you were kind of expecting?
Yeah, I think, the RWAs is still a nascent situation where we still need to do a lot of education. We still need to do a lot of work to make sure that people are even aware that it exists. And so I think that's going to take a bit more time. But that's where we do spend a lot of time on. If you use one of our products called Robinhood Wallet, it's kind of the official Robinhood Chain wallet at this point. You will see that you can find our stock tokens pretty easily, but there's still more work that can be done to improve for the people that are eligible to access it. And then I think the meme coins, we were expecting it to happen. I think, to your point, it happened in a lot of chains. But we do think that there is value to it. We think that, it's bringing liquidity on the chain. It's bringing market maker on the chain as well. And so, once they are inside the chain, they're also looking at the other products that we have, and they're also, participating to the entire ecosystem. And if you look at the TVL, for example, of the chain, most of it is, stablecoin. So it's not necessarily dominated by meme coins completely. I think it depends of what type of angle you're looking at, and if it's trading, it's obviously more on the new coins right now. But we're also seeing a lot of bridge asset coming, and I think that's also a sign that the chain is attracting more people than just the meme coin traders. So it's just been a few weeks. So for us, like we're still at the learning phase on how people are using it. But our plan is still to push on the roadmap around RWAs, AI, and all these kind of things.
I wanna follow up on something you've touched on a couple times, which is the idea of like education and like maybe like a more skilled product versus something that's kind of like for the masses, right? Like we were talking about it in the context of perps, and I totally agree with you. Like I don't think my grandma needs to figure out how to like trade perps, right? Like and that's okay. And then more like a meme or a strategy. It's like we have these extremes, I guess, in the US where there's like accredited investors, and then it's like if you want to be, not to nerd out too hard here, but like if you want to be, affiliated person with an FCM, you need like Series 3, right? It's like so there's a lot of new products coming online, and you have such a broad consumer base. How do you guys approach like education, sophistication with the traders and the products you're rolling out?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very great question where, it will depend a bit on the product. So there are some products that are going to be completely gated. So you have to pass a different assessment to make sure that you can access, different level of options or perps, for example, in the EU. And that we think is kind of a requirement in some places because first of all, it's required by regulation, but also we want to make sure that people that are using the product actually understand the product. And we have some features that are more new, like for example, crypto, where, for a lot of people, they are not necessarily aware of it, but they can be interested in it. And so we have educational tools within the app. We also have like earn campaign where you can earn a bit of crypto if you pass an assessment. All this kind of thing is to kind of try to teach the customer about it and becoming curious. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of the way that customers are going to learn about things is by actually trying the things and getting exposure to it. We see a lot more people learning about crypto once they receive some crypto because they passed a course after than before. And that's because once they have it on their wallet, they are starting to look at it, they are starting to track the news around it, and they get more and more interested. And so I think for us, it's really this part of our journey for Robinhood. We want to make sure that our investors are learning more and more about their finance to also prepare for the future. I think the financial world has changed a lot in the past 50 years or even 20 years, but also the financial journey of everybody. If you think about Europe, for example, for the longest time, they had their retirement that was kind of guaranteed, and they didn't have to really worry about when they will retire. Now it changed in most of the big countries, and so they have to start thinking about how do I do that at 20 to really set myself up for success. And same thing in the US, opening an IRA or opening a 401k when you're 20 years old, it's not necessarily something that you think about it unless your parents are telling you to do that. But it's such a big differentiator in your future if you're able to open an IRA very early on, contribute to it on a regular basis, and start seeing the compounding effect of your investment. So that's the kind of thing that we want to push as a company. And we've done that in multiple ways. So for example, you can open an IRA on Robinhood will actually even match your contribution, which is something that for gig workers and people that are not necessarily part of a big company is unheard of. And the idea here is really to help them set themselves for success for the future. And hopefully we can do more and more of that. We had the Trump accounts that we recently launched the application for that allows, parents to kind of set an account for their babies with a bit of money funded by the government and philanthropists, and slowly they can start thinking about it and start making sure that their children will be set up for success for the future.
I think it's very obvious from hearing you talk that you're very, very deep in product and like you have great expertise and knowledge here. And obviously throughout the years, Robinhood has launched a lot of different products. And I'm sure, some of them were home runs and then others were not so as much. And from our audience and listeners, I know a lot of them are building in the space or, really pushing for certain things. And so I would love to hear maybe from your perspective of like, one, what really makes a good product? What crosses, the finish line to even get launched on your side? And then two, how long do you really try and build something before you either maybe throw the towel in or two, then build a V2, V3 because it was so successful, right? And you could kind of apply this to maybe the tokenization efforts, the chain, whatever you want. But I would love to kind of pick your brain on that side from the product front and really kind of get your perspective there, because I'm sure there's got to be a protocol for this, right?
Yeah, I think we have some protocol. I think for us, really, when we decide to launch a product is when we have strong conviction into something. So usually it will be, what is a differentiator for our product versus what already exists in the competition. So for example, when we launched Robin Earn, one thing that we noticed for any of these lending products is that during the announcement, they will tell you 1%, and within 1 hour, this percentage will change and will drop quite a bit. And so we wanted to launch with a euro 7%, where it's going to be stable, and it's been 2 weeks, it hasn't changed, it's still approximately 7%. We were also hearing a lot of feedback from customers that was about the risk around DeFi, what if the smart contract is being hacked, or what if there's an issue. So we launched with an insurance that cover some of these scenarios, and that's really kind of how we want to make sure that when we launch a product, there are differentiator that really makes it a no-brainer for someone to think oh, I should use Robinhood instead of using whatever feature I was using until now. But then I think for us, it's really the time that we spend with customers. So any product that we launch, we do a lot of user research to understand what are the pain points, if it's something that already exists at the competition, or if it's something brand new, are they actually resonating with the product? Are they understanding what we just launched? Do they have trouble to get through it? Maybe there is a confusing flow, or maybe there is a part of the feature that they don't understand. And so we will iterate with our designer and our product team quite a bit until we really feel good about it. And that's only then that we will start launching the product. And then we don't really do V1, V2, V3, V4. We more do constant iteration on it. And so that's probably why if, the four of us open Robinhood at the same time, we'll probably have some different experience because we run experiment at all time. Some are A/B testing, so some are a bit more complicated than that. And the goal is to learn how people are using the product differently and what type of metric it change. Sometimes you will see that conversion will improve, or sometimes you will see that people actually understand it less, or maybe they hate the product at all and they are kind of turning off the app as soon as they see it. So all of these things are kind of measured for us to really understand how to build a better product. And then about turning off a feature or throwing the towel, it kind of depends. There are some products where we don't necessarily see product market fit. And there are sometimes where it's just a question of we didn't build the right product. And so we get a lot of feedback telling us hey, this is great, but I don't need that, but I actually need something else. And that's where we need to do this iteration process to really improve. And we've seen that quite a few times. I think, for example, on the crypto side, for a very long time, we were just seen as Robinhood crypto being a simple app to buy and sell crypto. And, more advanced trader will not necessarily be interested to use Robinhood because it was too simple. There was no way for them to do complex trading strategies. And so in the past couple of years, we actually kind of changed our way to just not offer only this simple product, but also offer a more advanced product that anyone can use if they are more interested into advanced trading strategies. And so that wasn't us throwing the towel. It was more us thinking about how do we keep being good at what we were known for, which is being a platform that anyone can use, but also attract the more sophisticated traders that are interested into crypto, and they were kind of only using specific exchange until now.
Johann, Robinhood recently struck up a partnership with Arcus, formerly known as DYDX, and we had the CEO, Eddie Zhang, on Crypto in America last week to talk about it. What was the thinking behind that acquisition, and how do you see decentralized exchange fitting alongside Robinhood's centralized exchange business? Because there's some talk about perhaps an exchange, decentralized exchange, and a centralized exchange are competing products, and just curious to know your take on how you see those two businesses fitting in together under the Robinhood brand.
The partnership really is about, we think we're extremely good at a lot of things. When we spend time and resources on, we think we're extremely good at distribution and making complex problems simple. But we didn't necessarily want to also launch our own DEX and build something like this on our side. And so finding like the right partner for that was very important. What we liked about the idea with Arcus is that they had experience. It's the same team that was behind DYDX for a long time. They really understood the RWA aspect of what we are trying to build, and so they are spending time on that and making sure that people can trade stock tokens on their platform. And also, I think the idea for us is making sure that we can offer the best price in a lot of situations. And so being able to have multiple partners, multiple DEX allows us to kind of put them in competition and making sure that, the customer at the end of the day is the one kind of benefiting from this competition created.
I want to get back to this idea of like the tokenization sort of super cycle that, Vlad, your founder, CEO has talked about. We talked a lot about tokenization and all these other assets that you want to work with on Robinhood and the regulatory environment being more friendly to these types of products. What do you think actually needs to happen? You just mentioned a lot of this like continuous iteration that you guys are doing on products. What do you think needs to happen, whether it's like a consumer thing or like a issuer thing or just maybe a UX thing? Like, what do you see happening to get us to that point on tokenization?
Yeah, I think right now, it's still about accessibility. It's still pretty hard to access this tokenized asset. I mean, if you're American, for example, you can't use our product. So that's one big blocker. Yeah. But even if you're an international user, it's still very much limited to crypto platform. And so you have to kind of be already a crypto user to be able to get access to it. And I think that's really what we are trying to change here, where we want to be able to offer this type of asset no matter if you understand what is blockchain or what is not blockchain, but actually use the tokenized aspect of this asset because it's using blockchain. It's better for you, so you're going to use them. And so I think we're still at this transition period. There's a lot of reason for that. Also, the structure of this product sometimes is more complicated than just, holding directly a share of a company. And that's because of the current regulation setup that we have in some of these jurisdictions. So I think it's a combination of like better regulation that allows for more of this innovation, and at the same time also a better distribution angle that Robinhood is working on, and also other companies. But I think once everything is integrated within the same kind of setup, you will see people actually preferring to use a tokenized asset because there is benefit around it. Lower costs, instant settlement, 24/7, like we mentioned before, versus a traditional system where, it's going to be T+1, T+2, T+3, depending on what exchange you're using, higher fees, you have to only wait for the exchange to be open. So at some point, I think it will be a no-brainer to use tokenized assets.
Do you think, so on that point, just on tokenization and stocks specifically, there's been a lot of talk about whether it's like purely underlying redemption, one-to-one, or like it's some kind of wrapper. You guys, I think, have some experience with dealing with this just with the mechanics of like fractional shares, right? Not to compare them like one-to-one, but they are kind of similar in the way you would reference like the underlying asset. Do you think that users care or that issuers would be able to accommodate the kind of redemption rights that people want to see in traditional securities versus more of this like tokenized wrapper kind of setup? And I'll just compare it to fractional shares because to me, like the mechanics there seem sort of similar.
I think it depends what the customer you're talking about is. I think for a lot of retail customer that until now we're kind of not able to access exposure to this type of asset easily, or they were able to do it but paying a lot of fees. For them, it's actually a much better improvement, and so they don't necessarily care about the structure as long as they know that if something happens to Robinhood, they will still be able to access whatever they were holding before. And so I think that's really the part that a lot of people were worried about, is that making sure that if Robinhood goes bankrupt, which obviously we are not about to, but if something were to happen to Robinhood, they will be in a situation where they will still be able to have a secured interest. The second thing that we had a lot of requests for was dividends. So from the beginning, when we launch our stock tokens, you get the dividend of the company. And the third thing was around corporate action. There are still a lot of solutions that don't support corporate action. And so they limit themselves to very specific companies where they know that there is no corporate action coming up. We also support corporate action. So those were kind of like the most important part. I think where we are getting a lot of demand still is for more access to different exchanges. Right now, we are only offering US stocks and ETF. I think we see a lot of demand for people that want to access Korean exchanges or European exchanges. And we've seen it in the past 3-4 months. So a few stocks here and there that have been like driving a lot of volume in these places. And that I think is really the beauty of tokenization. Like, because we can use this engine for any exchange or any kind of asset in the world, you could see tokens for any exchange, no matter if they're in the Nordics or in Asia or something like that. And with one app, you can connect to all these exchanges. You can trade them 24/7. It's a very different structure than what it is today, where if I ask you to connect to a Korean exchange right now, you have not a ton of options to do that, even in the US.
Maybe another question I had for you too is like, on the front of competition, how does Robinhood think about that? You know, as tokenization expands, you guys are really diving into it, not just from traditional players like New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, etc., but also like crypto native platforms like Kraken that are moving into these on-chain equities. Like, do you kind of view it as like Robinhood is competing with traditional exchanges or crypto ones, or a separate category, a third category?
I think, we try to separate, first of all, who is just talking about it to be in the news and who is actually doing things. I think tokenization was a word that was used at all the conferences for the past 5 years or something. And it's really since last year that we really saw development happening. And I think Robinhood has something to play with that because to do something with that because of our announcement last year and this year. But I think for us at this point, we are more focusing on how do we solve this problem? How do we make sure that people can actually access tokenized asset 24/7 anywhere in the world? And then, depending on who is the issuer, I think it's more of a detail, where, at the end of the day, we'll be able to adapt to whatever structure is the best. But being able to really grow the pie and not just focus on grabbing market share of right now a very nascent business. If you think about tokenized asset, it's a very, very, very small fraction of the entire equity volume on a daily basis. So we are very much at the beginning, and there's not really a point for me to fight against, Kraken or Coinbase on it. But I can focus on actually bringing this tokenized asset to like the billion of people that cannot access it today.
We've talked a lot about the evolution of Robinhood and the products that it now offers compared to a couple of years ago when you started at the company, Johann. But, how do you think about where the platform ultimately goes from here? And you and I have talked about this. We talked about it a little bit on stage in Miami at Consensus. But what is the long-term vision for Robinhood? Is it to become a super app?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're already a super app in a lot of ways. We are one of the only app where you can have crypto brokerage from equities, options, retirement accounts, prediction market, futures, all of this in one app. And now, we're adding banking and credit cards and more than that. So I think we're already a super app in a lot of ways. I think that's what makes us successful, being able to sell your stock and buy crypto or vice versa in one app without having to wait or transfer money or anything like that. But I think there is still a lot that we can do. I think, there's a lot of your financial needs right now that you cannot do on Robinhood because maybe you have a different account structure or maybe you want to trade on asset that we don't support yet. And so I think for us, it's going to be making sure that any of your financial need is being supported by Robinhood. And that's when I think we could call ourselves mission accomplishment. Even then, I think there will still be a lot more to do. But I think the other part that we're already pushing on is how can we use technology to improve our system. So we talked a lot about using blockchain and crypto to improve some of the traditional systems that we have. But there's also the integration of AI that we're spending a lot of time on, making sure that we can offer you interesting and informative digest on the stocks and on the portfolio that you have on the platform, so that you can compete with, some of the institutions that have room full of analysts that are working 24/7. Now you can do the same thing because you have your AI agent that is powered by Robinhood, to offer you information that before that you will have to look online for 2 hours before you can understand exactly what's going on. So that's the kind of thing that we really want to focus on.
Yeah, maybe this ties into the last question we always like to ask our guests before letting them go. But aside from everything that we've discussed, what is one thing that you're watching right now that you think listeners should also be paying attention to?
Well, right now, I think prediction market is something that we are extremely excited about at the company. I think, it's an interesting world because prediction markets are not new. They existed for a very long time. But the way that now they're integrated and the way that you can trade on specific contracts, you can hedge your position in very different ways. And I think that's really interesting. Being able to hedge your portfolio against events that until now you kind of had to do very complex strategies to be able to do that, is a huge benefit that didn't really exist in the past few years. And I think it started also to revive a bit through crypto. So that's interesting. It's kind of two big products that comes from the crypto world right now, like Perpetual, like we were discussing, and prediction markets. And I think it's going to be interesting to see the transition into that space and seeing how it's being used more and more on a regulated platform, but also how the crypto world is kind of still using it in different ways on some of our competitors' platforms. So something that to watch for sure.
Speaking of, just before we let you go, I know we're wrapping up, but I got to do it. What's your final prediction for the score for the World Cup final? We know I think we know who you think is going to be in it, but what's your final score?
Well, I hope France, pass tomorrow at least. You can hear the accent, you know who I'm rooting for, but I haven't thought too much. I will say 3-1 France in final against Argentina.
Ooh.
Yeah.
We're not friends anymore, Johann. That's it. It's over.
We shall
I'm
see.
rooting-
Let's
I'm
do a
rooting for
prediction
England.
market. Yeah.
England, I think, will be interesting to watch. I wasn't convinced this weekend.
It's going to be
Fair
a great
enough.
game. Regardless, It's been a great tournament. But Johann, thank you so much for coming on today.
It was good to see you guys.
Yeah,
You too.
too.
See ya.